Hey, this is Matthew, and welcome back to Nerd News Today, and it's time for another statue unboxing and review. And today we're taking a look at another piece from Diamond Select, and another piece, in fact, to a previous series we looked at, and that is their DCeased series. DCeased is a part of the DC Comics. It's essentially kind of like their Walking Dead zombie story, but with, of course, a DC twist. Previously, we took a look at the DCeased Batman statue, which was made by Caesar and Alterton. So if you guys want to know a little bit more of the history about the DCeased comics, go ahead and take a look at that video. We'll give you a little bit of history about it. And if you want to learn more about that statue, in fact, as a whole, we did a whole panel with Caesar and Alterton during my Nerd News Today Toy Fair 2021 event. We talked pretty in depth about that piece. There's actually a lot of really cool things behind the scenes that went on with that. In fact, you guys will actually see some things that were cut from the original piece because DC said, no, we want some changes. So if you want to get the inside scoop on that statue as well as a bunch of others from those two guys, go ahead and check out that video too. So go ahead and make sure you take a look at those videos. But as for this one, we're here to take a look at Harley Quinn. So let's go ahead and take a real quick glance at her packaging. Harley is in the typical Harley Quinn style packaging for Diamond Select statues. We actually looked at a piece of hers from not that long ago, which, if memory serves, had a very similar packaging because Diamond Select kind of likes to keep things in the same style. So despite this being a DCeased piece, they're keeping it with just the Harley Quinn look, and that was the same way with the Batman statue also. So there is no special DCeased packaging. The only way you're going to know that it's DCeased is that, well, it says it on the box. We have a really great window in the front, as well as two windows on the side that you've seen. And of course, as always, the handy-dandy Diamond Select sunroof. The back of the packaging runs down essentially what went on in DCeased, or more or less a quick overview of what the plot is behind DCeased. No real information about what Harley did, which is kind of a shame because she did some interesting things in there. And it's also a fairly lengthy explanation of what DCeased is, so if you didn't know what it was before, hopefully by reading this you now figured it out and caught up. We've also got a really nice photo of what the prototype of the statue looked like, and it also lets us know that this piece was sculpted by Sam Greenwell. But of course, we're not here to take a look at the packaging, so let's go ahead and get Harley out of the box and take a look at the statue from all angles. And we are back, and here is our DCeased Harley Quinn. So the thing that I noticed first about her, and I think it's hard not to notice, is that her face is super scratched up, and so is her arm. So what's the story with that? Because I remember reading the comic, I don't remember seeing her like this, walking around the entire series like this. Well, it turns out that this piece is actually based on a specific variant cover. And that's the variant cover from DCeased #1, which was made by Miko Swayan. I'm not sure if I'm saying that name right or wrong, but here's a link to the original image. You guys can see what it looks like. So that's what this is actually based on. That's pretty cool. It's kind of interesting to see they took a variant cover as their inspiration for the piece, and I wonder why they went that direction. And not just something that we saw a lot more throughout the series, but that's their prerogative, that's their choice. And I think it was an interesting choice, so it kind of worked out, I think, fairly good and fairly interesting too, because most Harley Quinn pieces, you're not going to see her battle damage, so that's kind of a nice risk that they took. So it's interesting that they took their inspiration from a variant cover of all places. I don't know why they didn't just use something that was more widespread, but you know, maybe that was the popular choice. I don't really know. I wasn't really super into the DC's comics when they were first coming out. So I don't remember how much hype there was over that specific cover, but it's kind of a cool choice. Neat nod. I'll give them that much. And it does make for a pretty one-of-a-kind looking Harley Quinn, because not every Harley is going to look this way, that's for sure. So yeah, let's talk about this piece here. And one of the things I actually do like a lot about this piece here, I'm showing you guys right now from behind. It's kind of a weird angle to look at. It's actually this fence here. I know it's a weird place for me to start my reviews, but this is such a cool looking diorama piece. I have to tell you guys, like, I wish Diamond would go in that direction and just make like diorama pieces that you can use for action figures. Because when we've seen them do it with their Diamond Select figures, it's really great. And again, the statues always have like usually very cool bases. They would look so good for other figures. I wish they just sold these things separately as generics, but that's a rant for another day. Let's actually focus on the statue itself, and let's talk about the Harley Quinn face. Does it look like Harley Quinn? Well, yeah, I'd say it definitely looks actually a lot like Harley Quinn in terms of that cover. So they really nailed her look by that artist. That's really great. I think the paint job as well on the hair in particular looks really nice. Very good hair. I like the blue, I like the reds, I like the pinks in there. I think it's really cool, although you're seeing actually as I move it around, one downside to my particular piece, and that's one of her pigtails is kind of popped out. So we actually had that as a problem with another Harley Quinn we looked at. We had like one where she had one of her pigtails like almost unicorn horned, or I think it might have been one of her bangs that was like unicorn horned up. That's something I suggest you guys take a look at. I think I might be able to wiggle it back down or glue it back down eventually. This one is kind of loose too. They're in place. It's not the worst thing. I would say this is one of those cases though where if you're going to order one of these statues for yourselves, buyer beware, and either get it from a place you can get it in person, like your local comic book store, or if you're going to order it from a place that you know can do returns or exchanges. And make sure you take a look at that statue before you take her out of the box, just to save yourself a lot of trouble later. So we've got the pose, we talked a little bit about the outfit, but let's go a little bit more in depth actually on that here. I do like the shoes a lot. I think the boots are pretty cool. I'm always a sucker for knee pads. I think these look really great too. I like her belt a lot also. The belt is kind of interesting. It does not move. It is, in fact, actually one piece on her, so that's kind of neat. It looks like it actually is a separate piece, but it is not. And the jacket is also, I think, fairly accurate to the comic, and I believe her corset, same thing too. I'm going to try and give you guys a better angle at it so you can see it just besides her cleavage popping out of you. But yeah, I mean, that's what it looks like, and it's a good Harley Quinn outfit. You can see also, again, pretty good paint job on this thing. There's not really much I would take points off for. Now the pose is pretty cool too. Again, like a lot of the work was done in this case because it was already designed nicely by Miko when they first made that cover. So yeah, the hard part was then figure out how to translate it into 3 dimensions, and I think that's where this piece really works nicely because this character has a lot of nice form to it. You guys can see from behind here, especially this is where it kind of gets more interesting, is they had to figure out what to do with that character. So yeah, you can see it's a very meant to be a sexy kind of piece, but it's also got a pretty decently dynamic pose. I mean, this isn't like, you know, an action-packed fighting pose, but for Harley and for what they're trying to do with this character at this moment here, I think it's not terrible. You know, like I normally am not necessarily into the super sexy poses, and this one's kind of just too overtly sexy for what I like. It also kind of confuses me because, again, we're in like this zombie, you know, anti-life zombies, I should say, kind of story here, and we've got Harley bending over, sending out a smooch. So, you know, that part I don't necessarily know if I like as much, but as a statue itself, it is a good statue. It is a good design, good sculpt here. So I will give them the nod to that. It's just not really a piece for me in terms of that pose, but they brought it together nicely, and it definitely works. It looks good. And another thing I do like about it too is that it's also kind of small. And small is not a bad thing because small just means more compact, easier to fit on your shelf. And you guys can see here, the statue is just about 8 inches tall, maybe a little bit less than 8 inches. So that's nice for me because I don't like to necessarily have giant pieces all the time. I like giant pieces, don't get me wrong, I like enormous statues. But sometimes it's cool too to have some smaller ones. They fit on desks or shelves better, and that real estate is kind of important when you're a hardcore collector. So I like that this piece is a little bit more compact. Paint job across this piece is also fairly nice too. You guys can see that there's not really much schmutz anywhere, not really anything to get too up in arms about. Pretty fair paint job. The jacket has a nice texture. That's because of the paint job, less so than the actual 3-dimensional textures of the piece. That's probably the one thing that's mostly missing from the statue here is much in terms of texture. It's a very smooth piece, and that's likely smooth by design because they're trying to emphasize, again, the sexiness of this pose, the sexiness of the character, and the shapes of her. So they didn't want to put any rough edges to kind of contrast that. And really the only rough kind of edges are what's going on in the background of the diorama piece here with this chain link fence, which I do love. So I think that juxtaposition of textures is actually really great. I kind of just wish maybe her jacket had something going on. I don't really know what would have been a solution to that. And it's not like texture is that big of a deal either, but something would have helped, I guess, kind of make her pop a little bit more. Because again, it's kind of just, the pose is what it is. There's not really too much to dissect about it. Now back to that base too, we already mentioned the chain link fence, how much I love that. I also just like this nice sidewalk piece here. There's a brick laying on the ground here. You know, again, nothing fancy, but that chain link fence really does help elevate it so much. And I really wish they sold that separately. That's kind of like my biggest takeaway from this piece here. Diamond, are you listening? Let's get some diorama pieces. Fans want them, and they look amazing. Let's get on that, huh? So to the viewers that are regular here on this channel, they know what I look for in a statue and in terms of what I want from a piece. And if it's going to be a character that's meant to be kind of a sexier pose, I'm fine with that, but I want it to be just a little bit more substantial than just that. And for me, this Harley Quinn doesn't exactly do that, but I think it's still a really good statue. It's just not necessarily the right statue for my collection. But there's, again, a lot of high points that we already discussed in this video. I like the homage to that DCeased cover variant from the comics. I think the paint job is very strong, too. I like the outfit. I like the pose. I think the pose actually is very well done and really nicely put together and composed in this piece as a whole. And I especially love that base, because I've already raved about that like how many times in this video? If it was a drinking game, you'd be dead by now. For me, I just don't really like cutesy statues, and this kind of falls in that cutesy area, especially with Harley just blowing a kiss, and it kind of just almost defeats the purpose of what I feel like DCeased is about, which is not about being cute and kissy and all sexy on the cover while you're being chased by zombies. It's about zombies trying to eat your brains, and this kind of does downplay that. As a Harley piece, though, it's a pretty great Harley, so I'll give you guys that. So if you're already a big fan of Harley Quinn, I think you're going to like this one a lot more than I am, but I'm not giving it a bad grade either, or a bad rating. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying it's not necessarily the first piece I would get for what I want out of Harley Quinn. But overall, as I've said, I think it's got a pretty good pose, really nice paint job. But overall, as I've said, I think it actually is a pretty well done piece. And I think if you're a big fan of the DC story or Harley Quinn in general, you're going to really like this piece in your collection. So if you want to pick up this Harley Quinn piece, go ahead and use our Amazon affiliate links in the description below. It helps out this channel and costs you nothing extra. And again, I do like this piece a lot. It is an interesting pose. It's got a lot of nice elements to it overall. Good paint job. I like a lot of parts of it. It's maybe just not what I'm ultimately looking for in a Harley Quinn statue for what I want. But again, I think for a lot of you folks out there, this is what you want. So go ahead, scoop her up. I promise you won't eat your brains. So again, this is Matthew from Nerd News Today. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave your comments below about what you think about her too. And we'll see you guys here next time with some more statue reviews.